they used to call me scariest cop in the West because I'll fight any man, but you can't fight a ghost. You can't shoot a ghost. You can't shoot a black spirit. You can't shoot things hovering.
I am Cary Thomas Cody, and I invite you to suspend disbelief and put on your brown pants as we talk to my Uncle Mark today. He is at this point, a Kiowa elder, and he's always been around the campfire for me growing up. And so I've heard a lot of crazy stories, but I feel like that's probably barely even scratched the surface of what is to come. So first, Doc and I are going to catch up. Doc, how is everything?
It's been pretty good. It's been pretty chill, pretty busy with my wife in production of another project we've been working on.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yes. After Crooked Face, we got in contact with another team about another project that we're working on. I'm not sure how much I can say about it.
Spill the beans.
I don't know about it. But she's just been busy, and she's been doing really well, and she's killing it. So
okay. Well, I'm proud of her. If you guys haven't seen Crooked Face, that was a short film that we put out on Halloween. Indigenous horror short film inspired by Indigenous folk tales with our own little spin on it. And it was filmed right here in the same house on a budget of $0. And so you get to see what some no-budget filmmakers do with some nice cameras and lights and an interesting story. So it's really cool. We're going to put out a how we made video for that one here pretty soon. So stay tuned for that, and that'll be a lot of fun. But for me, spooky season was good. It was very busy. Orrin and I went and spoke at Rose State College last week and just talked about Indigenous filmmaking, Indigenous voices in film and why it's important. And it was good. We had a lot of really good questions. There was good feedback. It was fun. We got some gifts for coming over there to speak to some young filmmakers, and it was nice. And so it is Indigenous Peoples Month, right? That's what they call it now.
Yep.
And and so we're celebrating, man. So we're gonna sit and hear some scary stories from my Uncle Mark. So, but other than that, life's good. We don't really have much going on for the rest of the year, at least the Skull Crawlers. And so I'm really trying to put out some more podcasts and focus more on the channel and hopefully keep that ball rolling. So anyway, thanks again for tuning in. So I would like to introduce my Uncle Mark Anthony Cody. He is my dad's brother. And he's got great stories, and I just would love to hear more about him. He was in law enforcement for a long time with the BIA, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And from what I've gathered, it's kind of like a real life Darkwind situation. And so if you guys hang out for an hour or so, or however long it takes, we're just going to let the cameras roll and hear some stories. You're going to hear some good stuff. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening.
So we wanted to start off with childhood.
I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Mark Cody. When my father passed away, I got a letter in the mail, and it said to Mark Cody Asenhittle. And I asked my mom, I was like, "What's Asenhittle?" She said, "Oh, that's your real name. That's not your government name." And I was like, "What government name?" She said, "Cody's not your real name. It's the name that your grandpa chose for y'all's family." And I was like, "What?" So anyway, our actual family name according to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, United States government, is Asenhittle. So it'd be Doc Asenhittle, or Mark Asenhittle, Cary Asenhittle, Mark Asenhittle. My wife, Florence, they changed, their name was Gilbert, but in the 60s, her dad changed their name back to their original Kiowa name, which is Adakabo. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. But when I was growing up, I was like, I'm full-blooded Kiowa from Lawton, Oklahoma. And when I was growing up, I was always like, man, I want a cool name like those Northern Indians, like Coming to Kill and Sneaking Up on the Enemy and scalping somebody. And never knew I had a real Indian name, which was Ace and Hiddle. And I don't know, Kiowa has changed over the years, and our tribe is trying to revive the language now. And we're there. The younger people are starting to learn Kiowa, but I know when my dad talked about it, he spoke fluent Kiowa. Mom spoke Kiowa, and my grandparents spoke Kiowa. When we grew up, everybody spoke Kiowa, and we didn't learn it because my mom didn't want us to be prejudiced against and people making fun of us, and so we never learned Kiowa. But growing up, everybody spoke Kiowa, and then we walk up there and we sit down with our grandma, grandpa, and they'd be like, blah, 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 you know, talking Kiowa, and then they start laughing at us. We go, and run off. Yeah. You know, they'd be like, you know, you can make up some words, you can make out some words and stuff, and it was like, dang. But we never learned Kiowa. But now there's a big push for the Kiowa tribe to teach our young kids Kiowa if you live in that area. And so Ace and Hiddle, I'm not for sure that's how my dad pronounced it. And most white people are like, or non-Indians are like, oh, you sound German. Ace and Hiddle. I'm like, no, German. You have to pick German. they started 2 world wars, you know.
Yeah.
So
God.
anyway, I was like, no, Ace and Hiddle is it means leading them up the hill. So most of the times you get your names by your acts of bravery in war or in battle. And so apparently my great grandpa was leading them up a hill in battle, so he got the name Ace and Hiddle. And as far as my wife's name, her name was Gilbert, but her dad changed it back to Adakabo, and I'm not for sure how to pronounce it, but that means bringing in the medicine. And during the Sundance, her ancestor was one of the people that brought the medicine into the Sundance. So that's what that name Adakabo means. And so when I first met my wife back in the day, her name was Sini. And I was like, Sini, I never heard that name before. So I call her Cindy, Sandy. And then her last name Adakabo. And I was like, So I was like, okay, I got to figure out, because she's pretty and I need to, you know, be able to talk to her. And you know, remember people's names is really important. And so I always thought Sini every time I saw her, Sini. And so
God, you could just slide up in her DMs, huh?
yeah. So I had so my and then Adakabo. I mean, I was lost with Adakabo because there's Akinabo, there's, man, I don't even know how many names are, you know, sound similar in the Kiowa language, but Audible. So yeah, so anyway, I finally learned her name. I had to put my skills and my max skills on her. She's from Carnegie, so she didn't have any chance.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's up, girl? Yeah, what you going on? And I used to dance back in the day, so I won her heart over. And so anyway, so I met my wife. So I'm a full-blooded Kiowa. My name is Mark Ace and Hiddle Cody, full-blooded Kiowa, married to my wife, Florence Sini Cody. She's a full-blooded Kiowa also. So I got full-blooded Kiowa kids. We got three children. And so we grew up in Lawton. And if you go back in history to like the late 1800s, there came a point where Christianity came to the Kiowas, and so you either stayed Kiowa and chose the Jesus road, or you was Kiowa, and at the same time, peyote came to the Kiowas, and then at the same time you stayed traditional. So there was kind of like three different paths. Our family chose the path of Christianity. And so we were raised in church, and as Christians, we didn't participate in powwows and singings and stuff. We did have Kiowa singing in our church, but we weren't allowed to dance. They told us it was non-Christ-like to dance and to sing at the powwows, which when we turned 18 and later on, we found it's not. My brother pioneered the movement to where you could be charismatic and go to powwows and dance and bring the culture back. And he helped redeem our culture. And his name's Spencer Cody Jr., not to be mistaken with my dad because he looks old.
Yeah, that's my dad.
That's Cary's dad. But so anyway, so we grew up in a church, and so we never went to powwows. We didn't know Indian stories. Now we heard about Deer Woman back in the day. Our family home was out at Mears, Oklahoma, west of Mears, where my grandpa hunting horse his house was. And so we'd go out there all the time, and we'd play out there with our cousins, and they'd talk about Deer Woman stories and Deer Woman being out there. And so Deer Woman was a prevalent thing. And then owls, sometimes they would say owls are messengers of medicine people or medicine men. And so we kind of had a little fear of owls, but mostly we grew up in church and we didn't really experience anything like that. But
so growing up Christian, and you say you heard about these things, what were some of the things that your parents would say to do if you were to experience something like that?
Okay, so just hearing from my mom, my dad's family grew up, they were in the Jesus Road since 1800s. My mom, I think they finally came to Jesus Road by 1920, maybe 1930. And so so growing up Christian, and these are my stories. This is my opinion. It's not anybody else's opinion. Just as from when I was raised, is there is a spiritual realm out there, because I grew up in church, and you're taught about David and Goliath being a giant. And it's like, oh, you're just thinking there's stories, but in reality, there was a giant back in the day. And you're like, what in the world? Mm-hmm. As you get older, but as you're a kid, you're talking about David and Goliath, Daniel thrown in the lion's den, and Elijah being taken by a chariot of fire. And you just don't, you just go to church, and those are just taught to you year after year after year.
Believe those to be
real,
it's just like symbolic of any meaning.
Yeah. But on the other side, my mother, they didn't come to the Lord until later on in their lives, and they were peyote people, and also they had kind of have to explain medicine. So God gave the Kiowas the ability to heal through medicine and through herbs and different things, and sometimes he gave people the opportunity, the ability to do surgery. And then also on that other side, if non-Indians ever heard of an Indian saying, talking about vision quests, that was normally when a native went out to find his medicine, to find out, to give him strength during his journeys and stuff. So he would fast and he would go out into the wilderness and ask God, give him a medicine or give him a sign.
A vision quest is usually what I call when I go out to the woods and find a place to poop. Going on a vision quest. Nobody bothered me.
Yeah.
Who's got some toilet paper?
Yeah.
For my vision quest.
And so, so a lot of natives back in the day, like in South Kiowas, we're primarily, we're primarily from up north in Canada. We migrated down to Yellowstone, and then we went to the Black Hills area, and then around the Devil's Tower. And we have stories all there. And then we went down towards Colorado, Denver area, down to the plains where we met the Comanches, and we fought with Comanches, and we were outnumbered 10-1. The Comanches could never beat us. And so they ended up making a alliance with us. So then you had the Kiowas, the Comanches, and there was another tribe called Apache Tribe, Oklahoma. But they used to be called Kiowa Apaches. And they were with us, and so they were another band. And so we migrated down to the Wichita Mountain area, and basically the Kiowas were north of the Wichitas, and the Comanches were south of the Wichitas. But
this was all before the Trail of Tears, right?
Man, that's Cherokee. That's the 5 civilized tribes, and the reason we call them 5 civilized tribes is because they're easy to get snuck up on. So you got Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw Creek, and Seminole. They got caught.
Yeah,
we didn't.
Well, I'm just saying, before Oklahoma was a prison state, before it was Indian territory on a map, there were already natives here, right? Kiowas were already here, Comanches were already here.
Yeah, before the Trail of Tears, you had the Wichita, the Caddo were in the East Texas area, and then you had the Wichita, which had Keachai, Wichita, the Confederation of Wichita is the Kichai, some other tribes. There are like 3 or 4 tribes within the Wichitas, and that's why they're named the Wichita Mountains, is because the Wichita were here, and then the Caddos were south in Texas. And that's another story that you need to learn, because the Texans put a bounty on all Indian, Native American, and head, that if you could kill them on sight. So the Caddos moved up this way, and that was mainly caused by the Kiowas, Comanches, and Apaches down there raiding in Texas. And so, anyway, we moved down to the Wichita Mountain area, and we settled down there. There's a place called Camp Yeshua that used to be one of our wintering grounds. It's right under Tallbone Mountain, and there's an open field there, but it's real good because in the winter there's trees, there's mountains, and it's a good wintering area. Just west of there is my grandpa Hunting Horse's house, and it's still up today. And but most of the Kiowas stayed there, and in the summer times they would go to Rainy Mountain. And that's the first kind of, we call it mountains. That's the first hill you see coming from the north, coming into Kiowa territory. And then after Rainy Mountain, you got the Wichita Mountains that come up. And then if you really look about it, and then of course I'm Christian, so you got the flood theory. So if you look at the Wichita Mountains, they're only sticking out of the ground this much, but before the flood, they were huge mountains. So under there's a lot of mountains, and there's a lot of stories with the Wichita Mountains and Kiowas.
So going back to Rainy Mountain, that is a particularly sacred mountain within our tribe. My dad's told me about it. I haven't actually been myself. If I have, I don't remember. But from what I understand, a lot of Kiowas would go there and gather cedar and sage and stuff like that, right?
Rainy Mountain is one of our campsites, like I said. Then you got Camp Yeshua. And a lot of the people go to Elk Mountain. Elk Mountain is just right south of Rainy Mountain, and that's where most Kiowas go and get the sacred cedar, and they use that for ceremonies. But I'm just going to say something about that. Most Kiowas were nomadic and were going here and there, so you don't have to get your cedar from Elk Mountain. You can get it from anywhere you're at, and because the cedar is used for prayer and prayer up to our Creator, and so you don't have to go to Elk Mountain. It's kind of like it's held in high regard, but you don't have to go there and get the cedar from there. Doc, you got anything you want to go for?
I'm just soaking it all in.
Okay.
I mean, I've heard you talk about this before, so
Yeah, I'm glad we're recording this, because we never know how long we have on this earth. And so how I'm bringing my stories from the Christian perspective, Cary could get a person that has not had Christianity in their life, and they'll bring their perspective as far as Kiowa. And then you'll have a person that is in the peyote way. We call it the Jesus road, the peyote way, or the traditional way. We all have our different perspectives. They're not all wrong. God meets us all wherever we're at. So, but how I was taught in Christianity was that we had to stay away from peyote and traditionalists, and that was wrong because that separated our families. Like my grandfather, Hunting Horse, he had 2 wives, and when Christianity came, they said you got to get rid of one of your wives. And so, what did that do? When he got rid of one of his wives, it split the family. So now you have Hunting Horse, and then you have Satok family, and so you have two separate lines of the family that actually come from the same husband and 2 wives, but Christianity split that down the center. So I don't know, but that's how it is today, And I mean, I got a good wife. I'd only want one wife.
I know, double the problems, huh?
Double the blessing.
She's right here, so. Okay, so we're talking to my Aunt Sini earlier, and she says she grew up traditional. You grew up Christian, but for some reason you're the one who's had all the supernatural experiences.
Oh yeah, she watched Thunder. We were watching Thunderheart back when it came out, and Val Kilmer had a dream that he was running with the Indians, and they were running to the stronghold, and Graham Greene was sitting next to him in the car when they were talking, and he was looking at him and was like, "You had a vision?" And he was like, oh, I don't know what it was. He was like, you didn't have a vision. He was like, no, I didn't have a vision. He was like, you had a vision. How can you have a vision? I'm Indian. You're white with your Rolex and your nice suit and your shirt, and you never lived on the res. I've been seeking a vision my whole life, and you had a vision. And Val Kim was like, oh, I can't help it. And so anyway, that's how seen he is, because I grew up in church. I don't know these Kiowa ways. And so when things happen to me, they happen and I don't freak out about it. Like, so for instance, I'm gonna go back when I was telling you about my mother. She didn't grow up she didn't grow up in Christianity. They had medicine that they had. There's good medicine healing ways, and some call it buffalo medicine. And I'm not for sure. You have to get a traditional person to come in and identify that. But and then you had people that went out and sought God. And then so one of my grandpas, he on my mother's let's see. No, on my mother's side. Okay, let me stop right there. So on my mother, she grew up, and if there was an owl outside, that was considered a messenger of a medicine man, or a messenger of something bad's going to happen to you. So my grandpa, Tom Cat, his name was Tom Cat, and he was a tomcat.
Yeah.
Because one time we got an oil lease back in the 70s. My mom had an oil lease, and the bunch of Indians got oil lease about 78, 79, and became millionaires overnight. A bunch of Kiowas, a bunch of Indians. And we got a knock on our door one time. It's like that. And we're like, I opened the door because, we're all sitting in the living room, and there was an Indian lady, and there was two white ladies. And I opened the door, and I was like, yes. And they were like, is Ludi Cody here? And I was like, Mom, somebody's at the door. And she walked over there, and that lady's like, Ludi, this is these two people are the children of your dad, Tom Cat. And they held out some jewelry, like, yeah, this is that Tom Cat. And they were like, sister. And my mom went, yeah, slam the door. I was like, no. So apparently my grandpa was a Tom Cat. So anyway, back then, Christianity really hadn't set foot. We were just kind of learning the Bible and everything. So we're still transitioning from, my dad was born in 1926. His dad was born in like the 1900s, and his dad was born in the 1800s. So we're like 3 generations from the plains. We're the wagon trains going across the prairie. We were the ones shooting them, and that's 3 generations. So people are like, dang, Cody, why are you crazy? I'm like, well, it's still in my blood, man. It's we're a warrior society. We're fighters. And so, so you think about it, my dad, he grew up, in 1926, 36, 46 during World War II. He actually fought in World War II and was infantryman. And then my grandpa on my mother's side, Tomcat, he fought in World War I as an infantryman. And and then my grandpas, they were on the plains before 1876 when the Kiowa were captured and taken to Fort Sill. So, I'm like hearing stories like from grandpa, like they were on the plains. I'm like, holy cow. And I just grew up that way, listening to these stories. And so, anyway, my grandpa Tomcat, he had medicine that he had gotten from his vision quest, and it had so when you get that medicine, you can do certain things. You can do, like, some say you can't eat rabbit, some say you can't eat squirrel, some say you can't eat turtle. So there's different things that medicine says you can't do. And so
I can't eat vegetables. Tell my wife that. No, I'm going to stop you earlier because I've always been a picky eater, and I'm more adventurous now. But my wife's like, man, how are you so healthy and you don't eat vegetables? I'm like, well, we're hunter-gatherers. And so my people out there chasing the great buffalo, not the great broccoli. We weren't farmers. We hunted.
Yeah. I got a story about that, man. I grew up Indians, eating Indian food. Like, Indian diet is what you get from commodities. So we had beans and fry bread, biscuits and gravy, liver, kidney gravy. We even had corn. We call it Indian corn. And I remember growing up eating Indian corn, and they were like, you're lucky you get the golden slipper. And I was like, all right. And I'd eat it, and there was a cow hoof, and then you'd eat all that food out of there. And as I grew up, I was like, oh, I don't want to eat golden slippers anymore. And your kid, they give you kidneys. I used to eat kidneys.
Nah,
and
I
they
do love kidneys.
I don't like kidneys now, man. I
Anytime
can't handle
a kidney at a pal, I'm like, dang, who got kidney?
Also, one of our delicacies is boat, and so we, we eat the cow guts, and they put beef in there, and they cook it up, and we basically ate everything that God provided with us from the buffalo, and so it's passed down through the generations, and so.
Have you ever heard of this thing called second harvest?
No.
Okay, so a white person came to me one time and was like, hey, you're Native American? Huh? I'm like, yeah, Native American. I'm like, here we go. And he's like, do you guys ever do the second harvest? I was like, second harvest? What is that? I was like, oh, well, he's like, when Indians, eat every part of or use every part of the buffalo, right? I was like, well, yeah. I was like, well, apparently, like, there would be a famine, and they would have to go through like their poop and find food that they can eat again, and they would pick it out like corn and stuff like that, and they eat it again. They call it second harvest. And I was like, yeah. I was like, no, we did not do that.
We raided
I think we
other
died.
people before.
I'm not trying to be racist, but that's white people. We ain't digging through no poop or nothing.
Yeah, I was like, yeah. So I guess you use every part of the buffalo twice. No.
Yeah. We actually use the buffalo as to cook with. Because it's grass and whatnot, and you can make pottery and you can make all kinds of stuff. And back in the 70s, they were trying to revive the culture. So at Fort St. Leonard's School and different places, they would have the elders come in and teach you how to do pottery, teach you how to paint, teach you how to talk Kiowa language, teach you how to do things Kiowa. And I wish we'd bring that back. They would say, hey, we're going to have everybody come. We're going to teach you how to make. So I learned how to make teepees. And you can go to the Kiowa Tribal Museum in Carnegie, Oklahoma, and they got teepees. But I know how to make teepees. And then staffs, the staffs, original staffs, they had them made out of the cavalry swords. And so, and they're heavy, but that's what they use. But now when they dance, they don't use the heavy ones anymore. But the original ones had the cavalry swords that they would take the blade and put on the staffs and stuff like that. But anyway, going back to growing up eating Indian food, I remember when I went to the Federal Police Academy, and once I became an officer, and I was around a bunch of non-Indians, and I used to say white people. Man, it stunk, man. It smelled like vegetables. Their farts smell like broccoli, vegetables, beets. I was like, oh my God, it stinks. I need some good old bean farts and some hamburger farts and steak farts, not this vegetable farts. So, but anyway, but going back to Doc's, to the question with Doc's from my childhood and to what you were saying, I grew up in the church, and so we didn't really, we weren't really into traditional things other than we heard deer woman stories and we heard different things like that. But I know that growing up, like you couldn't say owl, saw pole. Some say it saw pole, some say saw polo. And that's a cuss word because it's almost like that's a curse. That's bringing a curse on when you're mad at somebody, you say it to them, meaning I want something bad to happen to you. And of course, when I was young, my mom and dad would talk Kiowa, and I would run around. They're like, I was like, well, y'all said it. Y'all trying to get somebody in trouble, Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, I grew up in church, so I didn't grow up traditional, but my mom did, and she said like when the owl came, when something happened, they would have to do things because it was a messenger, or they could actually send things to somewhere. But growing up,
wait, send messages with owls like in Harry Potter?
Yeah. So say for instance, you're sitting there at sleep and then you start hearing an owl outside your window, and I'll tell you a story. One time, while I'm getting to my other story, is one time Celine and I were living at Buzzard Creek in Fort Cobb, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. We had just got married. We just had my first daughter, Ashley, and we slept with windows, and Indians don't have screens on their windows, and so we were sleeping, and the moon was out in the middle of the night, and our window was open, and all of a sudden, say from some window, I saw somebody looking in like that. And I was like, oh. And he's like, well, I was asleep. So he's like, Mark, what? And she's like, there's somebody looking at our window. And I was like, she's like, I was like, what you want me to do? Go chase him off. I was like, so I tried to be like Spider-Man. I started going on this side of the wall, and this side got right up to the window. And then when I got, so here's the window right there, and I jumped over and I went, hey, and there was a big old owl sitting there. He was like, no. I was like, he flew off. I took off, ran to bed, ran back up, closed the window. But yeah, it was just weird because he looked like a man looking in. I was like, dang.
That is
scary, but
might have been.
Who knows? But so anyway, so my one of the stories that really mystifies me is 10 miles south of Carnegie, my Cody family home place is, and there's that's where my grandparents' house was. That's where my dad's land was, and there's a mile down the road south and a mile west is a place called Eagle Heart Springs, and we used to go swimming there all the time. And so we go out a week and spend out a week with my cousin Billy and old boy Sean and Garnita, and my aunt Lavon was living out there. So my parents would take us and drop us off and we'd go out there and stay a week, go fish and swim. And so our biggest thing was we wanted to go to Eagle Heart. So you had to walk a mile from their house this way, then a mile south, and then a mile this way. So I think it was me, Mike, Joe, Billy, and I can't remember who all was there. And Joe's my cousin that we raised. Anyway, so we got to Eagle Heart, and when you get to Eagle Heart, here's a dirt road right here. Here's the springs right here, but you got to walk this trail through the woods. And they had a little clearing here that they had kind of like at Cat Springs where they had picnics and stuff like that. So it was all for us, and my dad used to always take us hunting, squirrel hunting. So we always carried a 22 around. So Mike had that 22. And so we were walking, and as we walked into the forest and came into the opening, we saw a group of owls with their arms stretched out like this, and they were just dancing in a circle. And we're like I said, we didn't know nothing about it. We're like, look at that. And Mike's like, man, he starts shooting because we had automatic. Anyway, and every time he hit an owl, it was dust, but they wouldn't stop. They were just dancing around in a circle like that. And then we're like, get on, and we took off running.
Yeah, like pigeons in a parking lot.
Yeah, we were trying to catch them. Like, get on, and they were probably about 3 foot. They're about this tall, man. They were just dancing around. All of a sudden, they just started going like this, and then they went up into the sky and disappeared. And we were like, whoa, man, that was cool. Let's go swimming. Oh, last one is a rotten egg. I didn't even like freak us out or nothing.
Oh my god,
that's 4 people. So we're all 4 hypnotized. I mean, we all have that story. You know,
unbelievable.
I mean, that's crazy. You know, and so that's just one of the stories. One time they had gone to Eagle Heart. Like I said, you got to walk a mile this way, and it's like 100 degrees too in the summertime when we'd go. So you had to walk a mile to this road, a mile that road, and a mile. And anyway, this road, they had a creek there, was all covered in trees. And so they went earlier, and I was following by myself, and I was walking on this road that way, and I heard, while I got to the bridge, I heard, and I was like, yo. And they say, you know, you're never supposed to turn around. And so, you know, I was just kind of like, just walking like, I ain't turning around, and kept hearing. Then he started running at me, and I took off running. Yeah. And I stopped, and it was stop. And I took off running, and I stopped, and it was stop, and it was getting closer. And I was like, oh Jesus! I was like, all right, man, I'm finna turn around and look at that sucker. So I turned around, and there was a deer, little baby deer, sitting there looking at me. And then I started backing up, and he started walking, and I stopped, and he walked. I was like, yo! And then all of a sudden, this big old mama deer jumps out of the into the road and she snorts and then that thing runs to her and then they take off and I was like, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I guess sometimes it's okay to look back.
Yeah.
It might just be something, logical. Like a
Little baby little deer chasing me.
If it was my dad, he'd be like, it was a 10-foot ghost.
Shoot. So that was one of the stories I had when growing up. And then I like being scared because I have a sister, Tex. She was born in Dallas and they called her Tex, like Forrest Gump. But anyway, yeah, everybody knew Tex. Everybody knows Tex. Everybody knows Junior. Junior is my oldest brother, Spencer. Everybody knows Tex. Everybody knows Junior. They don't know Tommy. They don't know Mike. They know me as a baby boy. So we had seven brothers and sisters. And so anyway, Tex would always, she called me Markle Twain because my name's Mark Anthony. And so she called me Markle Twain. She's like, Twain, let's watch a scary movie. And we watched Dr. Digby Shop Theater, and they would have, Frankenstein, Dracula, those old ones. But when you're growing up in the 60s and 70s, they're really scary. And then the ultimate ones, when she took us to The Exorcist when we were 7 years old at the drive-in theater, we're like, yeah.
Sounds like my Aunt Carol.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
And then so we would like whenever we went somewhere with Tex at night, she'd come home and the lights were on. She was like, I turned the lights off when we left. Somebody must be in there. Twain, go check it out. I'm like, no. And so I run in the house and run out real quick. And I was like, there's nobody in there. And we walk in, or if the lights were off, she'd go, I left the lights on when we left. Go check it out, Twain. So I have this scary desire to always be afraid, even though I don't want to. So, but yeah. So then as a child, I had a friend named Curtis, and he had weird things going on in his house, and he'd always tell me about it. I was like, Curtis, you're exaggerating. But in high school, one time he called me and he was like, hey brother, can you come over? He said, I'll buy us some pizza. I said, shoot, yeah, man, I'm coming over. So I went over to his house and he's like, yeah, my parents, his mom was Creek, and she used to always go to Holdenville for singings, and they would have singings till 2 or 3 in the morning. I went with a couple of times, man. You can go to Holdenville and that part of town, that part of the country, it gets scary out there, and they'd be singing inside, and you walk outside and be like, yo, what's going on out here? But anyway, they had left, and he was like, my parents are gone. Can you come over and hang out with me? So it was night. It was about 7 o'clock. So we got there, and the pizza came. When I was eating, I heard his parents up there talking and walking around. I was like, dude, I thought your parents were gone. He said, they are gone. I was like, what's that up there? He said, oh, that's a ghost. I was like, what ghost? He's like, yeah, ghost up there. And I swear you could hear people walking and laughing and talking, and I was like, So anyways, he said, go check it out. And I said, so I didn't want to disturb parents, so I was sneaking up their stairs. They had a stairwell, so I was like, old house is like, so I was just barely crawling up, and the light wasn't on in the room, but I could hear him laughing and talking, and I was like, all right. I kept crawling up, and then all of a sudden when I got to the top, it got real ice cold, and then I was sitting there, and all of a sudden I was reaching for the door, and then they just quit talking. And I was like, yo, and I heard footsteps walking towards the door, and I took off running down and I was like, dude, let's go. And he was like, what? He's like, they're not going to hurt you. And I was like, I ain't staying here, man. There's something up in there. There's something up in their room talking and making noise. And then my brother Mike, another time, we had bedrooms. He had a room. I had a room here. He had a room here, and our beds were right there. And so there was a wall separating us, and I was crashed. Every time I crashed, I'd always hear him talking. And when I listened, he wouldn't talk. And just if I fall asleep, I was like, yo, what's that boy doing? And Mike used to be in drugs and all kinds of crazy things back in high school. And so I had got saved when I was 14, so I really changed my life around. And so I said, I'm going to go pray for his room while he's gone. So he was gone. And I went in there and laid on his bed, turned off the light, and I was like, dear Jesus, help Mike. And it's something like this. Right in my face. I was like, oh, my God. I thought it was Mike, and I flipped the light off because we like to fight. And I was like, you punk. why did you hit me for? And all of a sudden there was nobody in there. I was like,
Oh my God.
flipped off the light with the bathroom, make sure I didn't have a bloody nose. And I was like, ooh. And then later on, I asked Mike about it. And I was like, dude, I used to hear you talking. He's like, dude, man, he's on some bad stuff, man. I used to astro project and, all kinds of crazy things. And I used to be in black magic. And I was like, yo.
That is horrifying.
I was like, I'm glad you got safe, fool.
Me too, Uncle Mike. I'm glad you're still with us. You should come on the pod sometime. I want to hear these stories.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's those stories. But I went on to I got married to Cenie. We moved to East Texas. I don't think we ever had any things other than I saw a meteor one time when driving from Lawton to Texas. It's like 6 hours, and we'd take the back roads. We go to Sherman, Denison, and down Highway 69 all the way to Mineola, and then back up to Garden Valley. And sometimes I get sleep. So one time I was driving, Cenie was sleeping, and I pulled the car over, and I was like, I was doing jumping jacks, trying to get myself awake, and I was stretching. All of a sudden, I seen this meteor, and it was just sparkling. It was blue, green, different white, and it was just like, and I could just see that sucker, and I was like, holy cow. And it went, and I jumped in the car and I took off driving. Man, they said that thing probably went down to Argentina or something. But it just looked like it crashed right there. I was driving down the road. Did you see the Arkansas? Man, and you can see the trail, the tail, and everything. I was like, holy. But anyway, that was pretty cool. But yeah, a lot of the stuff, like I said, didn't happen until I got into Indian country law enforcement. And Indian country law enforcement, I grew up in Oklahoma. And, we're more civilized here than on the reservations. On the reservations, they're real traditional. Their traditions go back centuries. And when I first went out there, I'm full-blood Kiowa, but I never participated in our culture, our dancing and our singing and different things like that. I was mainly in the church. And so when I first got hired, I got hired out on the Southern Pueblo Reservation. There's 10 Southern Pueblo tribes. And I went out there to work out there, and that's where a lot of my experience.
That's in New Mexico, right?
Yeah. So that's where a lot of my experiences started.
Wow. All right. So now we're getting to the saga of law enforcement in Indian country. We learned a little about his history as a child, some supernatural stories there, some funny stories there. But this is where I feel like a lot of the meat is going to be right here. So I'm excited to dive into it. So what was it like getting to law enforcement in the BIA? What were some of the differences between traditional law enforcement and the BIA aspect of it?
Well, I liked, we call it Indian country law enforcement, and that's what I retired from. And before I got into Indian country law enforcement, I was a school counselor at Riverside Indian School. I got my bachelor's. I was good in numbers. I was getting an accounting degree. I hated being in indoors, so I changed my major to psychology. And then during the way, I have a brother-in-law, Dale Adokbo. He was in Indian country law enforcement with Otoe, Missouri. And he was like, yeah, you ought to try it out. So he hired me at the Comanche Nation, and I was a reserve officer for them under Chief Toma and Tinky. And so I worked with them, and then actually got my psychology degree and my associates in criminal justice. And also I went through collegiate officer training program where I got my CLEAT certification. And then I got hired on at Riverside Indian School because I was putting in for City of Lawton. And it's during you have to pass their physical before you can move on to the next step. And so part of the physical, you had to jump over a 6-foot fence. And so I wasn't as big back then. And I was cross country runner, wrestler, tennis player, lettered and all that. So I was pretty much into sports. And then I was skinny until Cenie learned how to make fry bread. But she was practicing, and then finally she learned how to make it. I was like, can you make fry bread? Yep. I was all skinny, pretty soon. Can you make fry bread? Party. So anyway, but I was young, spry back then. But so I went to City of Lawton, and it was in the Great Plains Coliseum, where their annex building, where they're having the tryouts and stuff. And me and my buddies that were graduating from collegiate officer training, we went over there and we put in, and so I didn't know how. So apparently, when you jump a 6-foot fence, you're supposed to get your arms, swing your body over, and drop down. Well, I was booking it. They're like, you got a subject wearing a hat, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And you have to remember that. You have to do all this obstacle course. And then at the end, you got to give them the description. So they told me that. And they said, as soon as you open the door, your time starts. I opened my door, jumped out. My first thing was that 6-foot fence. I hit that 6-foot fence like that and bounded over. I was like, ooh, yeah. In my mind, all 3 seconds, and I hit like this, I'm like, yeah, Spider-Man. And I heard out. And my knee split that way and this way. I was like, uh-oh, that's not right. So I fell down, and I was like, excuse me. And they're all talking, like, what's up? I said, I think I broke my leg. And they're like, what? And they came over there, and they called the ambulance over there. Like, I heard a crack. And they were like, okay. And they went, whoosh, and put the scissors all the way up. And then my knee went, whoosh. I was like, no. And then they put me in the ambulance and hit every bump all the way to Comanche County Memorial Hospital. So I had to take 9 months off and rehab from that. Poor Cini was pregnant with Doc. And we walked in the Indian hospital. We go to the Indian hospital, and they get a wheelchair for me, and Cini, a big old boat hanging out, pushing me and Doc. And then one time this couple came up and was like, brother, here's $20. I feel sorry for y'all. I was like, dang, we must have looked caught on. Caught on means pitiful in Iowa. It's like, dang, Cini's pregnant. I got a busted up knee. And you know how non-Indians, they get a busted up knee, and they go to therapy and all that. Indian hospital, they're like, okay, you're going to Oklahoma City for therapy. And I went to Oklahoma City. My sister and Cini took me to Oklahoma City for therapy, and got up there. And they were like, all these white people walking around with these big old things you see football players wearing. And they're like, yeah, man, ain't no lie, man. They pulled my box out, and this doctor looked at it. He's like, what is this? And you know that brace Forrest Gump had?
Oh, yeah.
Indian hospital bought me that brace. And he was like, man, I was wanting you to dial this thing at 45. And, man, this sucker just look like, I look like Forrest Gump, man. I'm walking around like.
Sounds like the VA.
I was like, what in the world? And he just kind of looked, shook his head. He's like, can you get a brace that old? And they didn't. Indian hospital don't give me nothing. I ain't trying to hurt on Indian hospital, but dang. Y'all watch Res Dogs, man. When you go to the Indian hospital, that lady chewing her gum, like, can I help you? That's what it's like. It's like you inconvenience her for being sick. So you go to the Indian hospital, you're sick. By the time you see the doctor, you're well. Because you've been there, you've been sitting so long, you're going for a headache. But he's like, what you here for? Well, I had a headache 8 hours ago, but I feel better now.
Yeah.
Oh, shoot. I've had all of that exact same experience.
Yeah.
And in healthcare, we're fortunate that in our treaties that we get free healthcare, but you get what you pay for. And if it's free, you ain't getting nothing.
Yeah.
You gotta bribe people. You gotta beg people. Man, I'd be out here. I need a knee brace. I better look on Facebook Marketplace or a knee scooter. Like you said, all these nice white folks just scooting around.
A clinic or something.
Yeah, exactly. You got to beg people. Who's got one of these? I need one of these. Yeah.
Yep. And then your doctors in Indian hospital. I'm not putting down Indian hospital. My parents both. My mother was a LPN in Indian hospital, worked in OB, delivered babies from 1976 to about 1993. So everybody, if you were born between that time, she probably delivered you at Lawton Indian Hospital. My dad was a cook down there at Lawton Indian Hospital. He ran the kitchen. So not putting down Indian hospital. They fed us, paid our bills and all that. But like some of my doctors were like Oriental. They'd be like, oh, I'm like, huh? And then somebody go, I'm like, huh? I think I even had an African one. Like, so it's like they get all the doctors that get their degrees from Lord knows where, and they hire me in the hospital. You're like, this like you don't get good doctors like the VA probably. Yeah, it's like what in the world?
Oh yeah. When my dad, we were dancing at the Powell a couple years ago, and the Coward War Clan. It's particularly like a warrior dance. It's in the middle of the summer in the hot sun. You dance out there, and he thought he'd be tougher if he didn't miss a dance, didn't drink any water, didn't eat anything. And so he woke up in the middle of the night, and he's throwing up and muscle spasms all over. So we took him to the ER, and there's this on July 4th, of course, of course, these things only happen on holidays. And so we get him in there finally, and this guy was like, oh, I'm part Native American too. And my dad just look at each other, he's like, Cherokee. I'm like, all right. Yeah, I did the whole, my great grandmother was a Cherokee princess. I'm like, man, even at the Indian hospital, we have to have this conversation. Yeah, I wonder how many times he's had this conversation before.
Damn, I'll say. Dang, one time I went to a white hospital and I had something on my back they had to do, and so I was a federal agent, so I had good insurance, health insurance. And my sister was in a hospital. We go to her, and I was like, "Hey," I called Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal, and I was like, "Hey, I got Blue Cross Blue Shield Federal," and they were like, "Oh, you can just go to this clinic right here." And I went in there, and there was an Indian doctor in there, and I said, "I need to check in," and he was like, "Oh, we can't see indigents." I was like, man, he racist. Can't see indigents. You're an indigent yourself, boy. What time are you? I didn't know what indigent meant, but I knew it was racist. So anyway, they wouldn't see me. So my brother-in-law, he's Hispanic, and he's used to racism. So he called the person in charge of the hospital, chewed them out. Next thing you know, that doctor came out. Oh, sir, I'm going to do it for free. And I was like, oh, bull crap. And he was like, I'm Choctaw too. So yeah, you Choctaws, y'all quit trying to act white. Sheesh. But anyway, so yeah, I hurt my knee, and so I had to take a year off. So I went to school at Riverside Indian School, became a counselor. And at that time, it was kind of crazy at Riverside. Kids are running the show, and then they brought us in a new guy named Stan Holder. They brought and tried to do some new things. And so one time I'm sitting in the door, and this is my first time working with Native American kids, and they're all walking around, and it's very important if you're gonna learn Kiowa, because they it's like hang your daw means you go hang your daw on nothing. I'm done. Hang your daw. Well, they made it to slang. They go hangy, and so it's ruining our language. So if you talk Kiowa and if you're young, learn Kiowa right. It's very important because you're losing our language when you start talking that way. But anyway, that's the first time I started working with Fort Salinas Riverside Indian School, and they had kids from all over the United States coming to this reservation school, and so it was awesome. I was like, man, we got our own kids. But anyway, one time I was in the dorm because I was a counselor in one of the dorms, and all these kids, they all lived there for 9 months out of the year, and so they could live in a reservation in the north, the northwest region, the reservation, southwest region, anywhere in the United States, there's a reservation. They could live in there, and all over Oklahoma. So I was down there with another counselor. His name was Audible. And all of a sudden, we put the kids down at 10:30, lights out at 10:30. So 10 o'clock, they get ready. They start doing their chores at 9:30, 10 o'clock. They go to the rooms, and they got 30 minutes before we turn lights off at 10:30. So lights off at 10:30. Suddenly we heard a commotion upstairs. And each room had 4 kids, like 4 kids in each room. And we heard this big commotion, and 3 kids come running down there. Mr. Cody, Mr. Cody, help us, save us. Like, what in the world? What's going on? Somebody up there fighting. They're like, no. We're in there talking, and all of a sudden this black shape came into the doorway, and then it came and it attacked that one kid, and he's still up there and it's attacking him. So we took off there, run up the stairs and got up to the second floor, and that kid was sitting there, and he was just like laying there, and we're like, dude, you okay? And he was catatonic. He was like that. So we carried him down to the bottom because we were scared too. We were like, what in the world? But we carried him down to the bottom, put him on the chair, and we were talking to him. They're like, yeah, there's something up there. It was bothering us, and it got him. And I kept going, hey, boy. He was sitting there like that. He wasn't blinking, and tears just coming down his eyes. I was like, yo, and I was going like that, like, hey. And he wasn't moving or nothing like that. And I was like, Lord Jesus, what happened to this cat? And then he was just crying. About 20 minutes later, he finally snapped out of it. And we had to call a medicine man to come pray for the dorm and smoke it.
Yeah.
It's like, what in the world? So Yeah, that was pretty trippy. But
Do you have any theories about that? Did they describe it in any way?
no, they just said it was a black form just at the door, and it came in, and they felt coldness, and they got afraid. They felt this sense of fear, and then it actually attacked that. So I don't know why it actually went to that one kid, and they were probably about 14 years old, 14, 15 years old. So, but that was my first experience with the paranormal. I was like, what in the world? And but I was there for them during 3 to 11 shift, and then you had the midnight shift, and but that was my first time. But at Riverside, they would say, even at Riverside and at Fort Salinas School in Lawton, they said there's little people running around there, little Indians running around there. And I'm like, yo. So when Cini and I first got married, we talked to my grandpa George, and he had to go to Fort Salinas School in Lawton. And he would say, yeah, there's little Indians that run around in that woods back there. And everybody talks about it. And they would come into dorms and tickle your feet or be running through the hallways.
Oh,
and
heck no. There's a reason why I'm so afraid of Chucky and Leprechaun. It's in my genes.
Yeah, the little people. So I think Comanches call them Nunapedes or Nunapees or something like that. But I don't think the Kiowa ever had a term from them. But the Kiowas do believe in Bigfoot, and they have stories about Bigfoot. But as far as Nunapees and stuff, little people, that was at Fort Seal and then at Riverside Indian School. And then so I'm assuming that you have all these natives coming from all over the nation. They bring stuff with them, that from growing up.
Whoa.
So when I was at Riverside, I actually got hired on at the BIA police. And so my wife and I moved out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, moved to Rio Rancho. I think Doc was 5 years old, 4 years old? How old? 3 years old? 2 years old. Dang.
I was quite young.
But yeah, if you go on my Facebook, you got a picture of little Doc and me. And he had a auntie that loved visiting him. And her name was Tanty. He called her Tanty, and she'd come out all the time and visit with us. And but anyway, working on the res, I guess it was weird because they speak native language first, like Pueblo first, and then they speak Spanish second, and then they speak English. And the reason is because they still hold on to their traditions. And then the Spanish conquered them, probably 16 or 1700. I'm not for sure, 14, 15. But the Spanish conquered them, and then they revolted, and they killed all the priests and stuff. And so they learned Indian, and they learned Spanish, and then finally they learned English. And so that they talk their own language when they're out there. And so when I went out there, the villages are like you would think in like they got adobe walls. There's no paving. There's streets. They still have the plaza where they hold their ceremonies, and they have these houses around the plaza and all around. And then now they're starting to build outside of the pueblos, regular homes and different homes like that. But when you go there, it's a culture shock, because here in Oklahoma, we're pretty much assimilated to the culture. We go to college. We're pretty much have lost our identity. But you go out west, they really get into. I mean, they still have their culture. And one time,
it's pretty third world out there, right?
Yeah.
I remember one time we went up there, our family, to see you guys, and you drove us up to the Pueblo villages, and it literally felt like a different world, man. I felt like I was like in deep Mexico. These kids running around that probably didn't even have running water, and they just looked rough, just looking at us like we lived in a completely different world. I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy.
Yeah, they really impressed me moving out there, because I really got convicted because I had been saved, and we didn't learn our Kiowa culture. And then I moved out there, and they spoke their Kiowa culture. They spoke their culture. They spoke their language. They practiced their culture. And this, they came from back to Anastasi's. They used to be cliff dwellers, and they moved to the Rio Grande Valley, and then they moved up and down the Rio Grande, and then they were farmers. And they have these pueblos where they hold their ceremonies. And the people I worked with were actually Pueblo. The officers were actually Pueblo. And they would be talking Pueblo all the time and making fun of me. So it reminded me back when I was a kid. So I really enjoyed being out there. And then when you go out in the res, it's like you have the whole res to patrol. Like you have the villages spread out here, but then there's nothing out there. And you drive out there, and there's Santa Fe Mountains out there, and there's Los Alamos Mountains, and you could drive out there, and you go to Jemez, and there's mountains out there. And so it's really a different culture, different world out there. And they like say for instance, like Halloween. On Halloween, they don't do the trick or treat Halloween. They have what's called Hallows Eve, or they go Day of the Dead. And what they do is they cook this big meal, because when I was driving out there, they cooked this big meal, and then they would invite you in. So I'd be driving out, Officer Cody, come here. Grandma wants you to come in. Like, what's going on? Something's going on. Because I was young, rambunctious. And I walk in there, and they have tables just set, all kinds of food, every kind of food you can think of. And then right in the center, that person, whoever passed away, they would have that food set for that person. And you were honoring them when you came in and ate. And then you eat there, and you go down the road. Hey, Officer Cody, come here. Grandma wants you to come in. So-and-so wants you to come in. You go and you honor that family. And they put out their favorite foods. They put oranges, apples, and their favorite foods out there in the middle of the table. And you go out there and eat with them, and you honor that. And so when I first went out there, it was just learning the culture, learning the language, learning the traditions, because some of these pueblos, when they have their ceremonies, they shut the pueblo down, and you can't go in there. There's no non-Indians in there. And one time I'd go in there, and they're like, I had some kind of call in there, and they had the pueblo shut down. And I got to the roadblock because they don't let anybody in, and they were like, hey, I said, hey man, I got a call, so-and-so. They asked me to come here. And this guy pulls out a sheet. He starts waving it. What in the world? What you waving a sheet for? And then I look way over on this hill, and this guy pulls another sheet, and he starts waving it. And that's how they're then pretty. All right, you come in. I was like, what in the world? Yeah. These are really in this.
Like smoke signals.
Yeah.
And so then I drive in there, and they had these long patchy boots on, or Pueblo boots, and these breechcloths, and carry bows and arrows. Like, what, y'all having a movie over here or something? And they're like, no, this is how they dress. I was like, holy cow. And still today, they protect their village at night. They have warriors that protect their village, because of when the Spanish came and overtook them. They don't want that to happen. So they have people stay up all night and protect the village. And then they have officials that actually deal with public, like me. And then they have the holy people that actually deal with the spiritual aspects of the tribe. And so one time, it was in the wintertime, I was, they're like, Officer Cody, you got somebody laying on the railroad track south of the village. And this is north of Albuquerque. These are the villages, like you got Sandia, you got Santa Ana, Sandia, San Felipe, San Domingo, Cochi. That's the main ones there. Then I had Zia out west, and then I had Jemez. And then and then you get into the mountains like Los Alamos and Santa Fe. But this is all, I patrolled all this whole area. And I think it was in San Domingo, and they were like, Cody, you have somebody laying on the railroad tracks in one of the villages south of there. And so I said, okay. So one of the officers was following me. Another was like, hey, I'll help you. So there's three of us officers. So I pull up, and it was snowing. And it was in the wintertime. So I pull up, and they're like, check for tracks. So I pull up, and I stop, and I see these tracks going up the hill to the railroad tracks. And this is south of the village. And there's nothing. When I say village, I'm talking about no street lights, no nothing. Just the moon, the stars, the coyotes, whatever's out there, shapeshifters or whatever out there. There's nothing out there. And so it was me, and I was like, okay. So I stopped, and it was snowing. I said, there's some foot tracks, I'm going to follow them. So I started following them up, and then my two cars were parked over here, and they're like north of me. And I started walking down these tracks. All of a sudden, I came to this plate where it had oranges, apples, fruit, and tamales. And I was like, what in the world? I was like, these tracks come and they stop right here, but there's food sitting here. And I was like, huh. And I was like pondering it, and all of a sudden I saw my guys turn around, take off, turn around, take off. I was like, where are those guys going? So anyways, I'm going to follow the footprints, because I said, maybe a train came, instead of laying there, he was hungry and he was sitting there eating, and maybe a train came, and then he just jumped on and just took, because his tracks ended right there on the railroad tracks. There was there was food and there was nothing left. And I was like, man, it's kind of like the food from the Day of the Dead. And they just took off. And then, so I started backtracked to where went down in front of my car, and I walked across the field into a road into another field. It wasn't too far, probably 20 yards from my car. And I was sitting there, and I was like, dude, the tracks start right here. And I was like, you remember that guy that killed himself last year? Man, nobody answered. So go back 1 year earlier, this guy, he was molesting little kids, and he got caught. He was going to federal prison for life, and they let him one last time to go out to the Pueblo to do something. And when he went out there, he took a gun and shot himself. And where he died, that's where those footprints started. I mean, I was like, these are fresh snow prints. And it's like, what in the world? So,
oh my God.
So me growing up white, I didn't think nothing. I got my car and I said, hey, where are y'all fools? I said, I'll be 10-8, negative 25. There's footprints right here where this guy died last year. Got my car, found my guys there at the gas station. What happened, dude? They're like, dude, that was a ghost. And I was like, well, why did y'all tell me? Y'all just left me, man. Yeah, they just left me out there.
Who's everybody?
Yeah. But because I was a Christian, I wasn't from out there. They would like, Cody, there's somebody witching the tribe down there. Why don't you go down there and chase them off? And I go down there, and there's some people down there witching the tribe or using medicine against people. And when they do stuff like that, nobody goes down there. And so I go down there and say, hey, boy, get back in your house. You want to go to jail, son? No. All right. You can go scare somebody else tomorrow, So I believe the covering of the blood was on me. Jesus, Christ was on me. So, and then, when I first got out there, one of my first arrests, I arrested this drunk guy, and I was taking him to Santa Fe, and he said, Mark Cody, I know who you are. This is my territory. And I went, oh no, I was driving. I went, what? This is my territory. And I was like, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. And I was like, how in the world do you know my name? Oh, Lord.
I know who you are.
But anyway, New Mexico is called Land of Enchantment because, you got Roswell there. If you go north to another reservation in central New Mexico, apparently there's a alien base there. And they got all kinds of weird stuff down there.
They call it like Dulce Hill or something like that.
Dulce, yeah. My boss is like, hey, Cody, congratulations. You're going to be the special agent for Dulce. And I was like, cool. And I went home, always asked my wife, I was like, hey, shall we move? She's like, no, the kids are doing good. And I was like, I can get promoted to special agent. And anyway, I turned it down. And unbeknownst to me, dang, if we went up there, they have UFO sightings up there.
Oh,
apparently on that, just right there on that reservation on the mountain, there's a underground alien base there.
Yeah, I've heard all about that. We'll have to do some research and talk about it on the show sometime. That's spooky stuff.
We should go out there.
I'll say, be careful what you ask for, because one time we have an annual event called Cat Springs Camp Out in May. And one of Doc's friends is Bryce, and he came with the video camera. He's like, Miss Cody, I got this video camera. Man, I want to see if I can catch ghosts down there, man. I was like, boy, you better watch out for what you asked for. And we were loading it up. And so me, Doc, and a bunch of his friends went out there. And that time it rained, right?
Yep.
It was raining. It was so we had to go to a church and have our dinner at the church. And we have Cat Springs Camp Out to honor the kids for all the great deeds that they have done through in school. And really it's just kind of encourage them, hey, great job for school, and keep them in school.
You got some bees.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
So even little babies are like, he learned how to walk today. Yeah. All happy. And so that's what we do. We camp out and every year. And so Doc, he and his buddies, they brought a camera out and they were wanting to he's wanting to film some ghosts. And so they went back. So it was raining. So Doc and his buddies went back to the campsite. And you were in the tent, right?
No, I was in the truck.
Oh, yeah. Doc was in the truck, and Bryce and his buddies are in the tent. Or Bryce was in the tent, and I think a couple of other people in your truck. And I think you told this story on the other
other previous previous episode, we talked about this story. His perspective.
Yeah, so we call him Dirty Bryce, but Bryce, Dirty Bryce, he heard his little brother out and say, Bryce, because it was down at the creek area, and he was like, Bryce, help me, Bryce. And Bryce like, oh, my brother. And then he realized his brother's not there, so it's the mimic,
something.
And something
We all
out there
float
calling.
down here.
And so he runs to the truck and he starts banging on it. Doc freaks out and they took off and left Bryce. And he's chasing him and then he stops and jumps in. And one of his friends, DJ, never been back since.
Yeah. Some even refuses to go out there.
Yeah. Yeah. But so anyway, you had that story with the owl, a mimic or whatever. But yeah, so anyway, another story out there at one of the Pueblos in Albuquerque is so it's very violent on the reservation. And you were asking what's the difference between city law enforcement and country law enforcement. Well, country law enforcement, we're out by ourselves. You handle a call by yourself, back up maybe 30, 45 minutes, an hour away. So the academy really trains you how to self-defense, how to take care of yourself. And then the last resort is, you can ultimately save your life. You have to shoot somebody. And so I always grew, I felt ordained going into law enforcement because I'm there to help people. So I was never afraid. So I go to a party, be 20, 30 people in there, and where other people wouldn't go because they'd be afraid of getting beaten up. And I'm like, hey, man, this is what God called me to do. Let the chips fall where they may. I'm Kiowa, and I used to always tease the Navajo and all those people. I'm like, you lucky as Kiowa didn't come out there. Y'all won't even be here anymore. And so anyway, we'd always fuss and fight and stuff. And I get on the reservation and be like, what you doing on my reservation, white boy? I'm going to turn around. Does the sheriff deputy come with me? And they're looking at me. White boy, I'm full-blooded Kiowa. So anyway, we start fighting out there. But anyway, because my dad taught us to fight when we were young, and they put us in wrestling. And then I had an uncle. His name was Uncle Robert. And he had epilepsy. And so we learned jiu-jitsu and MMA fight for Uncle Robert, because if you're sitting next to Uncle Robert and he started doing this, that means a seizure's coming on. And before we like, what are you tasting, Uncle Robert? And then he grab you like that, and you were like, then my mom be like, let him go. She'd be grabbing his arm. She would like, turn your head. Be like, oh,
Turn your head,
just
tuck your chin.
He'd be like,
Look away. You're all tapping out.
Pretty soon, there ain't no tapping out on that. We have to ride it out till that seizure's over there. Hi, Mom. So yeah, we had to learn. Nothing against my uncle, man. He was the best uncle in the world. He couldn't work, so he's our football player. He was our quarterback. He was our pitcher. I mean, he'd be standing out there rolling cigarettes and smoke, because they had Prince Albert in the can and all they be doing all that. And, smoking the cigarette and everything. He was the coolest uncle. But anyway, that was my Uncle Robert Oyba. But anyway, so dang it, I forgot what
you're talking about. Learning how to fight.
Oh, learn how, yeah.
Not being afraid of.
So so I felt ordained to go out there. So I'd go bust up parties, and out there they tried to pull you over, because I learned law enforcement from a city perspective, where you're a public servant, you treat the public nice. Yes, sir. No, sir. You're really nice to them. You get on the res, they try to kill you. You pull a car over on the res, 5 guys get out and want to jump you. And so when I pulled a car over, when I was field training, I pulled a car over, and they were like, how you doing, sir? F you, mother effer. I'm like, I need your driver's license. Get the F off my reservation, white boy. I was, yes, sir. That is your prerogative. I'm giving you SHIT. And I'm like, okay, sir. And I hear my field training officer, and he was like, come here. I was like, what? He was like, dude, you're going to get killed out here. I was like, why is that? He's like, man, watch. And he walked over there. He's like, driver's license registration. shut the blank up and get out of that mother effing car. I mean, that's law enforcement out there, because them men is trying to kill you out there.
Yeah.
You know, if you're by yourself, there ain't nobody coming back. There ain't no help coming. So you have to learn how to handle your own business out there. And but majority of the pueblos and majority of the people are nice. I'd be fighting their kids in the house, and they just, you know, you're fighting and you're thinking, oh, they're going to jump in, but they just, you know, they don't get interfere. And then when you arrest them, they come out with food and like, thank you, officer. And they give you bread. I used to come home with bread, enchiladas, chilies, vegetables. See, like, oh, did you arrest somebody else? I said, yeah.
Yeah. So, meanwhile, they're putting that medicine on you.
Yeah.
So yeah, but when they're out drinking or partying, you're out by yourself. Yeah, they'll get out and they'll be like, "What you gonna do, white boy?" And I was like, "Come on, man, I'm powerful. Let's go." You know. And you always catch the loudest one. He'd be like, "Yeah, motherfucker." Then finally got to when I pull a car over, they all put their hands up and go, and there'd be somebody backseat and they're like, "Officer Cody, we're not doing anything." And somebody backseat like, "If you," and they're like, "Here you go, Cody." And they push you out there. So I finally got a reputation where, you know, people weren't smarting off anymore. But yeah, they try to kill you out there. But anyway, this I arrested some guy and took him to Santa Fe, and I got a call from my lieutenant. He's like, "Hey, 35, which means confidential. We got a murder here in one of the villages." And so I went to that village, and he's like, "Okay," he said, "let's check it out. Somebody reported a murder." So we went to the door, and the front door was all busted out, and opened it up. There was bloodbath everywhere, man. There's blood everywhere. I don't know if you can say it on a wherever, but BLOOB or D. You know how to say somebody was unalived. You know, there's certain things you can say, you can't say.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we walked through, and I'm like, "Holy cow, this is like my first unaliving." You know,
Dang.
and I'm like, man, there's blood trails here. There's hands on the wall. I mean, so we secure the scene, and then we find a body wrapped in a carpet, and just 2 feet come out, and then we call the feds, because we work close with the FBI, and they come out there, and so anyway, it's like 11 o'clock by the time we finish the scene. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, so I have to sit on the body till 6 in the morning until they can come back out with the emergency FBI ERT team. And so they're like, "All right, Cody, you got to sit on the body." And I said, "Okay." So then my other buddy, he was working midnight shift from midnight to 8, and he went to Santa Fe and arrested somebody. We booked people in Santa Fe, and he called me. He's like, "Hey, dude, I'm at McDonald's. You want anything?" I was like, "Yeah, bring me a breakfast biscuit with sausage, cheese, hash brown, orange juice." "All right, I got you, man." And so it was like 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting there watching the house, and all of a sudden the village just gets, because in the village you can hear noise. All of a sudden it got dead quiet, and I'm sitting there. I mean, it's just stone cold silent, and I'm like, what in the world? So I'm sitting there in the car like that looking. All of a sudden there comes, about a block away, I see some dogs coming in single file. I'm like, what in the world? And I'm just watching them like, what in the world? And they just walk. And here's the car here, here's a fence, and here's the house, and here's the door. And I'm about 10 feet away from the fence. And they come up, and they walk around in a circle right in front of me, and they all sit down like that. And I'm like, what in the world?
And you didn't climb into your truck scared?
No,
or anything?
I was just sitting there just checking it out. I was like, what in the world?
You had a gun in your hand or anything?
No, I was just like that. And I was like, what's going on? You know, I was talking to him like Thunderheart, like he was talking to that dog. You know, I was like, what's going on? And then one of the dogs jumped over the fence, and he walked over and he jumped into that door of the house where the window was broke off, and he was going like that. And he jumps in. I say, "Hey, man, you can't get in there." And then, and those dogs are still sitting there. I was like, what in the world? And then, you know, I was kind of like suspended disbelief, you know. So then that dog jumps out. He comes back. He jumps over the fence. I said, "Y'all know y'all can't be in there." And then they turn around, walk around, and then they head back there that way. And then
were they just res dogs? Were they wolves?
Just res dogs.
Oh,
just res dogs, man.
God.
Just rugged res dogs. I watch them, and I was like, "Don't be coming back either." And then my buddy
And
pulls up.
stay out.
Yeah, my buddy pulls up and he's like, "Is anything going on?" I said, "Nah, nothing but these dogs, man. They come around." He's like, "What dogs?" And I told him about it. He was like, "You go home now." And I was like, "Okay." So I went home, and then they called me about noon. They're like, "Cody, we need you out here." And I said, "What's going on, man?" Because I was happy to go out there anyway. This is my first unaliving crime scene. And so the body was wrapped up, so we didn't know who it was. And so anyway, I went out there, and they had the medicine men waiting on me. So they said, "Cody, those are the Navajo." I was like, "What was Navajo?" "Those dogs." I was like, "They're just dogs, man." They're like, "No, we got to do a cleansing ceremony for you." And so the medicine man took me over, and they did some things, and I just go along with, being a Christian, there's certain things that I was raised not to do. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't cuss, stuff like that. But a lot of Native tradition involves tobacco and different things like that. And so I didn't want to be disrespectful, so I just do some things with tobacco and all that. And so they took me aside and they blessed me and cleansed me, and they were like, "Yeah, the Navajos are here." And they had all the village was shut down, and they had all their people on the wall in the mountains and in their bows and arrows and stuff, and they're on high alert. And they said, Navajos are here. So, "What do you mean Navajos are here?" And they said, "We don't know." So anyway, so they cleansed me and everything, and then finally the evidence response team came and they unrolled that blanket. And it was a Navajo woman in there. Nobody knew it was a Navajo woman. Nobody even knew where she came from. But she had got killed or unalived over there. And they were like, "Dude, you just saw shapeshifters." And I was like, "What? Shapeshifters? What does that mean?" Those were the Navajo shapeshifters. And so anyway, they had to cleanse the village. It was like quiet, like dead quiet. Like that next night. So Navajos came to the Pueblos. Navajos knew there was a Navajo there before the Pueblos did. And so that was one of my first experience. Well,
so let me ask you what your theories might be on that. Who do you think the dogs were? Do you think that they were, obviously we're going with shapeshifters here, and in my heart, I think I believe that. Do you think that they were just medicine men confirming that a Navajo woman was ones that were murdered there?
Yeah, I think however they got there, whatever, that the Navajo priest had come over there to confirm that. And then because the Pueblos, they had to get their medicine out and protect their village after that. And it's happened on several occasions where deaths occur and the village will go into lockdown and nobody can come or go, and they do their traditional stuff to keep the evil out.
Can I ask, did you guys ever figure out who did it?
Yeah. We through our thorough investigation as a BIA.
Yeah.
Most investigations you just kind of stumble in and like, "Oh, okay." But yeah, we actually so this gentleman, well, I say gentleman, is this guy, he met a nurse at University of New Mexico hospital and got acquainted with her and invited her out there, and for some reason he brutally murdered her. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah.
And so he was in Albuquerque, and then
was it an Indian guy or no?
Yeah, it was a Pueblo
Gotcha,
guy from that Pueblo, and he was in
Okay.
Albuquerque, and we FBI put traces on the phones and everything, and they tracked him down to Albuquerque to a hotel.
Wow.
And they arrested him. So yeah, that was crazy.
Wow.
They said I saw a shapeshifter, and I didn't know. I mean, I just thought they were dogs. And then another time, I was sitting between San Felipe and San Domingo, out in the middle of nowhere, and I usually park. I work midnight to 8, and I parked out in the middle of nowhere. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there. I have my lights off, and I'm just listening to the radio. And on this side on my door here, I was like, "What in the world? Who's knocking on? Who's in the middle of nowhere knocking on my door?" Then I heard it again. It was like, "Pop, pop, pop." And I was like, "Crap!" And then I heard pop, pop, pop behind there, and then I heard pop, 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 pop. I was like, okay, Jesus. So I got my gun, unclipped it, and then I got my lights already. Got my my spotlight turned on, and you got lights on the top that you can go that way, front, back, front, all around. I was like, okay, all right, the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. I hit all my lights, man. And it was like 6 res dogs just walking around my car and their tails are. I was like, oh, thank you, Jesus. But was it dogs or was it the Navajos back?
Circling.
You know? So who knows? But being out in New Mexico, they call it Land of Enchantment. Man, I used to look for UFOs and Bigfoot and aliens. Never seen any of that. And I worked midnight day, traveled all around over there. But yeah, some of those. There's a lot of death out there. They're if you go back to the ancients, you know, who knows what happened before the flood.
Mhm.
What was happening during that time, because there's a lot of areas like Chaco Canyon. They used to say that was inhabited by aliens, you know, and it was abandoned a long time ago. And then when the army went from wherever they were past Chaco Canyon, the natives told them there's a alien village north of here that nobody ever goes to. And then the army asked permission, they could go check it out. And they went and checked it out and found that Chaco Canyon, but all the natives would stay away because they said there's powerful forces there.
Yo.
So who knows? You got Dulce up there with the alien base. You got Chaco Canyon. You got the Rio Grande River. You know, even going down to Muscalero. If you go down to Muscalero, you actually have real Bigfoot reports. Like people call in and say, Bigfoot's looking in my window.
No.
And their windows and their trailers probably 9 foot tall, and Bigfoot be bending over looking in there. And even my buddies, they'll have their car videos where they'll have a car pulled over and they'll, you know, squealing. They'll turn and look like that on their video, and you can hear it on their traffic stops. And they look, and then you hear a tree, and they'll be like, "Have a good day." Get in their car, drive off.
Fend for yourself.
But yeah, they actually have Bigfoot calls, literal Bigfoot. I mean, they ain't like, oh, dummy. I mean, they actually have people seeing Bigfoot prints, knocking on windows. I mean, it's a big deal out there in Muscalero.
And that's down there by Roswell, right?
Yeah, Muscalero Apache Reservation. And so I even had a buddy, he wouldn't call him Bigfoot. He would only call him him. He was like, have you seen him tonight? I was like, who's him? Because when I transferred from New Mexico to Oklahoma, I came to the Cheyenne Arapaho tribe, and we have 10 counties we patrol in Northwest Oklahoma. And they have an old boarding school there in Cheyenne Arapaho. And Concho Boarding School, which is closed down now, but before that boarding school, if y'all know the history of boarding schools, a lot of evil stuff happened with the priests and stuff like that, with the non-Indians and stuff in church. And actually, between the complex and the community building, there's a hill there that supposedly has buried children there. And so anyway, I didn't know that when I first came out here. My buddy, he was like, yeah, I'm looking for him. And he'd always go to McDonald's and buy a bunch of cheeseburgers and hang them in trees and stuff. And he'd get a bat and he'd start hitting the trees. And I'll be like, man, give me a cheeseburger, dude. No, it's for him. Man, give me a cheeseburger.
Yeah, it's for
Boy,
him.
you know, he ain't no him out there. Give me a cheeseburger.
No spirit
He
plate.
give me a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
But he hang the rest of them in the trees and he go hit there. Let's go hunt Bigfoot.
I've never heard of that technique while squatching. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah, he and then he had a big old knife to chop his hand off. He already had a plan. He's going to shoot it, chop his hand off, put it in the bag, and he had all this evidence ready to catch that Bigfoot. And you wouldn't believe how many Bigfoot hunters are out at Concho that come out to Concho, and also ghost hunters that come out to Concho. Yeah. And you know, they have these ears where they can hear stuff. One time I was out there on a Sunday in the afternoon. I mean, Sunday morning, probably about 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, way in the middle of nowhere in the weeds. And I smelled something stink and I heard some rustling. And all of a sudden I was standing, and all of a sudden this horse apple comes out of the trees and falls between my legs. And I looked, I said, I must have fell right there. And another one come, and it's being thrown at me. I'm like, what in the world? I get in my car. So I try not to overreact. And I was like, just drive off. But you can smell something distinct out there. But they say in El Reno, there used to be a facility where they had monkeys out there. They tested, and a couple of them got loose, but I doubt it. I don't know. I worked there probably 10, 12 years. Never seen a Bigfoot. I drove back roads. Never seen witches' covens. Never seen anything on the back roads. The only thing I really did see that I thought was an alien was a porcupine that got run over. And I can go, what in the world is this? It was all hairy and it had big like pads on his feet. And I was really looking at it and stuff. And it was a porcupine, but it wasn't spread out like that. It was just all, and they're like that big, you know?
Yeah.
But I traveled all over there. But one time I did get hit by Bigfoot up in this place called Cantonment up in Shine Arapaho country, and they have a lake up there called Canton. But on the north side, there's an Indian land called Cantonment. And one time I was investigating something up there, and I had to go to the woods, and there was trees all over, and there's green evergreens out there, and so I had to go investigate something. So my buddy, he was like, "You gonna be okay?" And I was like, "Yeah." So I got my shotgun, and so I'm holding it like this, holding it up. You're supposed to hold it down, but I was holding mine up, and I hear something running through, and it stopped, and I heard a rabbit, and I heard that rabbit, and I was like, "What in the world?" And then I turn around to leave, and all of a sudden Bigfoot's just like, bam, slapped me in my face, and I'm laying on the ground. And I'm looking up the stars like, oh, Lord Jesus, Bigfoot just hit me, that punk. So I flip on my light, and I jump off, and I'm like, you sorry, sucker? And I turn around again, and apparently my gun was catching that branch, and then it slipped under that branch. Twice knocked me on the ground. The first time I thought it was Bigfoot. And then the second time I saw it was that branch. I was like, thank you, Jesus. Then my buddy called me. He was like, Cody, you okay? You know, because he always check on me. I was like, yeah. I said, Bigfoot just hit me. He said, what? And I was like, yeah. I said, he was chasing a rabbit, and then he caught it, and it was screaming, and then he slapped me. He's like, as I'm laying on the ground right now looking up, he's like, you better get out of there. I said, I know, man.
That was a tree branch.
That was a tree branch. But you can't, no, Cary, you can't.
We got him going. Might as well keep it going.
I'm scared of, they used to call me scariest cop in the West because I'll fight any man, but you can't fight a ghost. You can't shoot a ghost. You can't shoot a black spirit. You can't shoot things hovering, you know? So yeah, it's, that was my Bigfoot story. And then, I'll wrap it up with one more story.
All right, perfect.
But one time I was at Concho, it was like in February, and it's like 5 degrees. And it was like 2 a.m. And at the old school, there's a bunch of stories with the old school. And I was parked at the old school.
It's an old Indian boarding school, right?
It's an old Indian boarding school. And then the Indians used to go out there and 49 out there during the summer. Because there's a basketball court in the middle of all those schools. There's a basketball court. So they pulled up there in 49. And a lot of people go up there and drink and stuff in winter. So I pulled up there. And I was like, man, I'm sitting here. It's like 2 a.m. It was like 5 degrees out. I'm sitting on that basketball court. And I usually listen to preaching or K-Love when I'm sitting out there. It's like 2 a.m, 5 degrees. There ain't nobody out there. And all of a sudden I see this little Indian kid running in shorts and a shirt, like summer shirt, shorts. He runs by. I'm like, what's that little cat doing, man? You know, then he runs by again. I was like, man, and there's a youth shelter over there. I said, man, I bet you the youth shelter. He ran away from the youth shelter. So I call it youth shelter. Hey, this Officer Cody. I said, BIA, y'all got any kids going on? I said, no, we don't have any kids at this time. I said, well, there's a kid running around here with no shirt, with the shorts and a shirt. It's 5 degrees out here. And that kid run back around again. And I started thinking, I was like, my car again, drove off.
No.
But he ran this way, that way, and this way again. I was like, man, there's a little Indian kid running around over there. I was like, Lord Jesus.
Oh my God.
Help me.
Wow, that is horrifying. Those are some of my favorite stories that I've heard on this podcast for sure, but just in general, holy cow, I'm glad we were able to sit down with you and record some of these stories. That's amazing. Would you be willing to come back on and tell some more? Or do you think that that's probably it?
No, I got plenty more.
Right.
We keep going, man. You chop it up.
No, we'll give you guys something to look forward to for the next
like
time.
Sean Ryan, 3 episodes.
We'll get it back on, guys. But yeah, I appreciate you for coming over here to tell some stories. Doc, I appreciate you for letting us record over here, and Kate as well, and Aunt Sini. But yeah, this has been Suspend Disbelief. We thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can follow us on Instagram at the Skullcrawlers, YouTube, Skullcrawlers Movie Club, We're on TikTok as well, Skullcrawlers Movie Club over there. So give us a follow. Doc, you want to plug your stuff? You got anything?
Simplify.
All right. Any famous last words, Uncle Mark?
No, don't have nothing.
No famous last words. All right. Well, as always, sleep with one eye open. And thanks for wearing your brown pants. We'll see you guys next time. Good night.